Good morning, everyone. Today, there's one question in the chat, and it's about so far about micromanaging. And the question is, I'd like to grow my business. I'd like to add new locations, but I've been told I'm a micromanager. And how do I avoid that? How do I do better than micromanaging? And I'll have to say this, that one of the biggest diseases in American management is the lack of ability to delegate. And that is just so common and such a hindrance to so many people. And it's people have taken courses on it, they've given guidance on it, but it's a mindset. It's a mindset, and there people say things like, if you want something done right, you do it yourself. Well, there's a lot of definitions of doing things right, and what is the level of detail that something has to be right. At the end of the day, with our tax preparers, for example, we started calling them tax preparers when I started 55 years ago. Over the years, different companies have called them different things. I think one of the favorite terms today is tax pro. But a preparer is a misnomer. What you want from the person that is preparing taxes, what you want is someone who gets referrals and gets retention, not a tax preparer. Obviously, preparing taxes is a component, if not the most important component of getting referrals and getting retention. But if someone said, "What's my job?" And they're preparing taxes, your job is not to prepare an accurate tax return. That's part of your job. Your job is to win customers to exceed their expectations and thus get a higher retention and a higher referral. And so there's different skill levels to tax preparation. It's not most of the time, if you go in and have the tax return done by 10 different people, it'll be the same answer, but your experience is going to be different based on all the other things, in all the other components in tax preparation, versus the attitude, whether you were greeted when you first arrived, whether the person is smiling, whether they are thorough and they ask you questions, or just take what you have, whether they if you've known them in the past, whether they remember personal things about you, about an illness you had, or an award you won, or you like to cook, or you like to play golf. People, the subtle interactions of dealing with customers is not simply doing a tax return, and that gets into delegation. So when I'm sitting doing tax returns, I could, if I was a total non-delegate and all tax season long, I did, let's say I did 800 tax returns, and then I went and assembled them and electronically filed them and checked them and etc. I did every single thing. I could only do 800 returns, and I would just have a job. Even if I'm self-employed, I would just have a job and not a business. I would have something that would be difficult to sell, and extra difficult to sell at a fair value. But if I can manage people, if I can have 2 or 3 preparers that are doing those 800 returns, and an assembler that electronically files them and copies them and gives a copy to the customer, etc. Now I can grow. I can do an infinite number of tax returns if I can only delegate the responsibility. And the results of the tax return are going to be about the same. And the chances that you're the best preparer in the universe, even if you were, it depends what you want to be. If all you want is a job doing tax work and you want it to be as perfect as you believe it should, then you can do everything. Well, my companies have done 100 million tax returns, and all the companies I've been with have been the fastest growing. And so you have to learn to delegate and let others do the work. I told this story, and one of my best lessons I ever was able to orchestrate. I talked about this on one of my previous episodes, where I had a employee who a great employee, but she just couldn't delegate, and she ran for one tax season. She was running our technical support department, so she had about 8 employees, and I just couldn't get through to her the importance of delegating and the value to both herself, to me, and the company if she could just learn to delegate. And then I stumbled upon a perfect teaching opportunity. Uh, she, her offices were next door to mine, and the copier for the company. This is 30 years ago when copiers were important. The copy machine was right in her office, just nearby, and I went over and I had some documents that needed to be copied. And there she was. There were 3 of her employees sitting at desks around the copy machine, and she was standing at the copy machine making copies. So I went over to one of the employees sitting at a desk and said, "Could you make me copies of this? I need them as soon as possible." So I'm CEO, and she reported to me, and so they went over and kind of figuratively elbowed her out of the way and made my copies. And there was an aha moment for her. I don't think she ever went to the copy machine again after that. She realized that those people sitting there doing other things were less paid, less talented, less skilled than her, and she needed to use her skills at something more than delegating. But again, that's a difficult thing for many people. In my career, out of the 5,000 people I brought in to the tax business, most of them, at least 80% of them, wanted to have multiple offices, and at least 60 or 70 or 80% tried to have multiple offices. And what I learned is that delegation is one thing if you're sitting in the office with people. So some people can't delegate at all. Some people like me can delegate easily. And I say that, and people just laugh when I say this. I say one of the reasons I'm a great delegator is I'm lazy and I don't want to do any work. I'm like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. When I was painting that fence, I conned Huckleberry Finn into painting the fence for me. And I just sat and enjoyed. I love work. I could sit and watch people do it forever. So um, what I've seen is 2 levels of delegation. One is I guess 3 levels. One is I can't delegate at all, no matter what. I'm always have to do it. I'm never going to trust anyone to do it as well as I do. And I'm going to limit my ability to grow my business to my own capabilities, my own limits. And that's the biggest I'm ever going to get. A second level of delegation where you stick your toe in the water is I can delegate a little, but they have to be in the same building with me. If someone is in an office 5 miles away from me, 10 miles away, across the country, I'm unable to delegate. If I can't see them, if I don't meet with them every day, then I'm not a good delegate. And then there's the third case is I can delegate, and I do delegate, and I can be all I can be all I can be because I'm going to be able to have others do the busy work that to be doesn't need to be the incredibly highest level. It can be imperfect. What's usually most important in most activities is getting the job done, not getting it done right. There's always there's always uh, a right way to do things. And most things, you don't have to be 100%. You can be 99.9% or 98.2% correct and still win the customer over. There's many things that are unnoticeable that people spend too much time on the last. They get 98% right, and they spend let's say they spend an hour getting it to be 98% accurate or correct or great, and then they spend another 2 hours on the last 2% when it doesn't matter. 98% was satisfactory. So it's a real disease, and you have to fight it, and you have to understand it if you don't have it. But you can either not delegate or delegate, and there's two ways to delegate. One is to delegate with locations out of your site, and the other is only within your site. So it takes practice and takes an understanding, and you have to agree on the results that are needed to be obtained. Too much time is spent, usually in most cases. I mean, obviously, if you are doing brain surgery or heart surgery, you got to be 100% accurate. But if you're sewing someone up after they cut their finger on a knife, I bet you there's a million different ways to do it, or certainly dozens of different ways to do it that all suffice. It's not going to be life-changing if you put in 3 stitches or 4 stitches. If it's perfectly spaced or not perfectly spaced, it's not going to be life-changing. But there are things that are life-changing, but that's not one of them. And you have to be able to decide that and differentiate that if you're going to be able to grow. But we have, so again, you have to learn to delegate if you're going to do that. And micromanaging is so harmful. And it's so much of it, and they miss the advantage. If I tell someone that what I need you to accomplish is X, or this is what I need you to do, right? So if I say, I want you to go to 50 businesses, I want you to dress up as our eagle in ATAX and go to 50 businesses and give out candy and give out gift certificates. And I would like you to get from that, we'd like to get 1 customer. Well, those are activities. Well, a better way to say it is, I need you to go to business and spend X number of dollars per business, including whether it's candy or pizza or cake or donuts, and get us 1 customer. Well, you know what? The other person is going to be able to use their own. If they say, I don't know how to do it, well, I can give you a suggestion. Here's one suggestion. You could give them candy. And this is what you might say to them. Or I could say, your job is to get us 1 customer, to give a coupon and a treat, or a treat, or nothing. It's up to you to get us 1 customer by going business to business. And not define the number of businesses or the type of item that you're handing out, but define the result. And that's how, if you do that, then they may come up with something novel that you never thought of, that never occurred to you. Now we have 2 brains thinking about how to get the desired result instead of 1. And most of the time, 95, 97, 98% of the time, they're going to just do it the way you're going to give a recommendation, and they'll do it that way. and that's all that's going to happen. But sometimes they're going to come up with something novel that's going to change and even be more successful. They did X, and they were able to get um, twice as many customers. They did X, and they got two customers instead of one. For example, one of the things that happens when you go business to business in costume is if you bring in donuts or candy or some of the customers or some of the employees in the location say, "Oh, I'm a, I'm a diabetic. I can't have anything with sugar." So think how clever one of my staff invented. They carried with them bags of sugar-free candy, and so they would go out, they would leave and go outside and come back in a couple of minutes and say, or on the way back on their journey, and say, "Look, here's some sugar-free candy." And wow, it was like it was a wow factor. I mean, it was wow. You went out of your way and you were handing everyone else donuts, and you went out of your way and got me sugar-free candy. And I mean, that person's ability to get customers was greater than anyone's because they were thoughtful and came up with, okay, I'll have some sugar-free candy for those people that can't have, and that's kind of one of my theories. Also, is I'll get off delegation now and say that maybe I'll do a whole hour on delegation and trying to convince of you those that can't delegate, trying to teach you on how you can delegate and do it well. But the sugar-free candy idea is what I call a tip of the iceberg idea. And I divide situations into one-off situations or things that are going to happen over and over again. And what we learned is that in some number, call it 12% of businesses that we went in, they couldn't have sugar. So that's a tip of the iceberg. That's going to happen over and over again. So you prepare for things like that. If it only happened one time out of 100, then you don't go out of your way to prepare systems. But if it's going to occur 12 or 14 or 15% of the time, you build systems to support that. And you look better to the customer or the potential customer if you do something out of the ordinary like that. The statistics are clear on people that have a problem with a business. They have something that went wrong, and their retention rate is X. But if you solve their problem, if you address their problem, you listen to their problem, solve their problem, their retention rate is significantly higher than if they never had a problem in the first place. So again, based on let's say tax preparation, let's say our basic retention rate is 79%, and that's for people. Most of them have no problem, but let's say the IRS sends them a letter because we hadn't attached something to the return or something. You go in, you solve their problem, you write the IRS, and you give them a discount or a refund, and the retention rate is considerably higher if they have a problem with your service and you're able to solve the problem. And so that's critical. Again, that's a tip of the iceberg situation, that you're going to have problems with customers and you're going to face adversity, and you need to be able to solve that and to get even a higher retention rate. Well, the topic today is I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about differences in me and other people. And you may think of them as good or bad or indifferent, but I think there are some unique things about me that almost see in no one. And so I'm going to tell you what they are. You can judge for yourself whether they're a good thing or a bad thing, but they've served me well in my long 55-year career. They've served me well, and they've served me well in relationships, in business, in life. And so I'm going to tell you what I think of it. That's I'm in either one of a kind or one of the top 1%. Only 1% are people like myself, and or less. I mean, small percent. So, and I've come up with some theories on phrases too, and people have phrases and they use them, and I have different definitions of certain phrases, like and I'm so one of them, for example, is and most people take what they hear and they say it without thinking because it sort of sounds right, like the phrase "perception is reality." And for most of my life, when someone said "perception is reality," I said, "Yeah, that makes sense," and I agree with that. And then it wasn't until 5 or 10 years ago that I had an epiphany and said, wait. Your perception is your reality. Perception isn't reality. It's your reality. Your perception is your reality. To be clear here, perception is not reality. It's your perception is your reality. My perception is my reality. It's not just a generic, if I perceive it, it's reality. That's not the way it works. And so that's one of the things that I come up with different thoughtfulness about common phrases that are used that most people live by. And I bet you if I went out and asked 20 strangers, is perception reality? Every single one of them, 19 or 20 out of 20 would say, of course, yes. But no, it's not. It's your reality. Your perception is your reality. Let's be clear. Words matter. Words matter. Another phrase that I recently changed in my mind is skin in the game. The universal definition of skin in the game means putting money into an investment or into an activity. And to that means, okay, if the person, they don't have any skin in the game, they didn't put any money in. Well, I changed that because putting money in isn't always skin in the game. If you're a billionaire and you put $1,000 into a contest of some kind or into a business, what do you care? What do you care if it goes bankrupt or makes $1 million? It's not going to change your life. That's no skin in the game. So what skin in the game means to me is, again, related to our new one of our new favorite pastimes in certainly in the United States over the last 30 years is playing cards and poker and being all in. To me, having skin in the game means I'm all in. Means I'm acting like an owner. And only 2 or 3% of employees act like owners. But 95% of owners act like owners. So to me, skin in the game is not cash. And sometimes it is, maybe most of the time it is, maybe almost all the time it is. But if you don't have an all-in mentality, you don't have skin in the game. That's not skin in the game. Skin in the game means I'm all in. And whether I put dollars in or time in, the way you build anything, build a personal relationship, whether you build a company, whether you build a building, the way you build anything, it's both time and money. And do not underestimate the time. The time is far more valuable than the money because money's replaceable. Time is irreplaceable. And that's why next topic on that I'm different from other people is I'm I'm so jealous of my time. I'm so jealous of my time. And I have this belief that when I think about my time, what I learned is when I was growing up, my dad was, I love my dad, great. One of the two biggest, my dad and my mom, two biggest human influencers in my life. And, I was blessed to be able to write them a letter and tell them about what each of them, they were proud of me and say, I know you're proud of me, but this is what I owe to you. And then they lived long enough that 15 years later, I wrote them a second letter and said, this is what I owe to you. And so with each of them, I gave them, I told them what they had done to my life and the example they had set in life. And my father was a tremendous. Both of them were giving people, and I learned from them that you can't outgive God. The more you give, the more you get. And I also I only made one deal with God where I felt somehow that I could make a deal with God. But when we were first starting out and I became self-employed, we had when we started Jackson Hewitt, we borrowed $25,000 on credit cards to start up Jackson Hewitt, and we didn't even have furniture in our living room or in our dining room. All the other rooms had furniture, but we were poor and we weren't making very much money. And we had an SBA loan where my ex-wife and I combined could only make $24,000 a year as a salary until we paid off the SBA loan. So we worked hard and paid it off in 18 months, but we had taken a step back. So I made the only deal that I made with God that back 40 years ago. And I said, God, I can't give 10% right now. I just can't. But I'll tell you what, I'm only making $24,000. And that 10% of that isn't very much. But I'm going to be making a lot more money, and I'm going to give a greater than 10%. I'm going to give 15 or 20%. And you know what? When you're making $1 million a year, 15 or 20% of $1 million is a lot more than the chinky 10% of the 24,000. So right or wrong, that's not the point. Whether I was right or wrong, that's not my point. But what my point is, as soon as we came out of that and I started to give, the blessing just poured my way. It was amazing. It's amazing, and the blessing, the things I was receiving wasn't from the people that I was given to, because I always one of my obsessions is I always have to give to people more than they give to me, but it was from something else good happening. We won the Walmart account, or we got a great deal with a bank, or we got a great rebate from our software. I mean, as I gave, the more I gave, the more I received. So I'm a huge believer in, and I watched that with my dad and my mom. They just were giving. We were poor, and yet they just gave at every opportunity. Another difference between me and others is, and I've told people this, and no one told me they felt the same way. So maybe there are others that feel this way. But for some reason, when someone tells me something, the first thing I do is say, why isn't that true? And I don't know if I do that because I'm so skeptical, or I'm just a skeptical person, or I've heard so many lies, or I've lost faith in so many people, or talk is so cheap, or I'm not sure why I grew up that way. I'm a little afraid that when I go and meet God, I'm going to be skeptical of what he tells me. So I'm just a skeptician that So when I have a quick process, if you're telling me a story, whoever you are, could be my father, my mother, minister, attorney, trusted best friend. When you're telling me a story, I'm thinking to myself, well, do I have any other supplemental information to think that's true? I mean, I'm going to give you probably the benefit of the doubt that it's probably true, but unless I can verify it in some other way, unless there's some other verification, it's so it goes into buckets. It goes into when you tell me something, it goes into three buckets, right? One is I don't know that doesn't sound right. Um, Bucket number two is, oh yeah, that because of this, that makes perfect sense, and I believe that. Or bucket number three, it goes into purgatory. It goes into fact purgatory that I don't know, and I'll put it out there. And someday if it's important, I may come back to it. I may, if it's really important, I may go do research and Google it and find out if it's true. If it's an unimportant trivia, then I'm not going to pay any attention to it and just forget about it. But if it's something that might be important in the future, like our job as franchisors is to take the pulse of the industry and just understand what's going out in the world. For example, someone told me the other day, this totally shocked me, and it probably shocked most of you. And it was right. Someone said to me just this week that Dr. Pepper had caught Pepsi as the second most um, drink, soft drink in the country. And so we could Google it, and sure enough, and it was divided into Coke and Diet Coke and Pepsi and Diet Pepsi and Mountain Dew and Dr. Pepper. But Coke is like 20%, and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper were tied at 8.3% each. So I was skeptical, and that to me it was so novel, and it might have future business ramifications for me, right? Because at one time, Coke and Pepsi were almost even, and now Pepsi's fallen down, and Dr. Pepper's caught up with them. So I've put into my future thought process, how do I think about that industry, and how do I think what's happened to Pepsi and what's happened to Dr. Pepper to make that change? And so when I'm competing in an industry, could it be useful in my thinking of how we're going to compete in our industry? How if we're third, we're going to catch number two, or if we're number two and very close, how we're not going to fall from 18% over 10 years down to 8%. What happened to Pepsi that did that? And so you study, Sam Walton said, you don't just study your competitor you use in your industry, you look at all industries to learn. And so there's got to be something in that to learn. And I'll tell you a story about Coke and Pepsi, that Pepsi made one of the most brilliant 60 years ago in the Depression. Coca-Cola had there was no such thing as Diet Coke back then and other things, right? And 65 years ago. And Coke had a huge competitive advantage. And I use this in my thinking in business today, that Pepsi had a simple message that they almost caught Coke until Coke changed their policy to be able to stop Pepsi's growth. But if I suspect if Coke hadn't changed, then Pepsi would be the number one soda in the United States today. But what happened is it was simple marketing concept. And for years, Coke said that was not going to work. That's not going to work. But it was working, and they grabbed market share, and huge chunks of market share, and they became almost as big as Coke back in the 30s. And it was simple. It was back then a soda, those little Coke bottles were 5 cents. And Pepsi came out with a 16-ounce bottle for 5 cents. And their ad was simple: get twice as much for a nickel. And it was close enough in taste and preference to people. It wasn't like a generic cola that wasn't competitive. It was a good taste. And many people today prefer, I mean, everyone has their preference that likes cola. It's either Pepsi or Coke. Very few people pick generic cola, but it was a good enough taste and a great message. And again, over several years, Pepsi was growing by leaps and bounds, and Coke was declining. And Coke said, "That's not going to work. That's not going to work. That's not going to work." And all of a sudden, they said, "Oops, we better replicate that." And they changed immediately, and it stopped Pepsi's growth. So you can learn from your all your consumer experiences. You can learn whether you can learn tactics to help build your own industry and your own competition. So again, I'm just totally skeptical, and hopefully that doesn't offend anyone. That I'm just most of the stuff goes into limbo, and I say, well, I'm not even going to think about it. That's not a good use of my time. But I remember we had a district manager at H&R Block, and when I was a district manager in the mid-70s, and he at every meeting we would be in an argument. There was two or three of us that were the leaders of the group of 18, and he would be one faction and I would be another, and my boss's wife would be a third, and we'd argue about things. And every time, it started out. I mean, the meetings were only quarterly, so it took me a couple of years to finally get to this conclusion. But if it was a tough argument, he would say, "We did a study, and we found that 67% of the people thought this." And at first, everyone in the room is like, and I'm thinking, well, that went into my disbelief, right? It went into my, well, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I'm gonna put it aside, and for now. Well, after he did that, like the sixth time at the sixth meeting, out of 8 meetings, he did it 6 times. He had done a study on exactly the topic that was brought up by my boss, our boss, that I said, no, this is a joke. And so from then on, whenever we had an argument, I would whisper to my friend next door, Gordon, I would say, "Oops, he's going to have a survey. He did a survey. Well, just watch." And of course he did. He always had a survey. Of course, he never did a survey. And he was totally wrong or virtually wrong all the time. Next thing is that's different than me is I'm so passionate about finding something you love to do. Life is too short, and my general theory is find something you love to do, work hard, and persevere. And if you're not going to work on Monday morning and looking forward to it, boy, you're wasting your life. I've had this blessed life where every day is an adventure. My job is my hobby, and my job are the same thing. My passion is improving lives and building systems and creating opportunities for others. I don't make other people successful other than I give them the best system and the opportunity to utilize that system, and then they take it and run with it. And I don't do the work for the people that I've helped, that the 1,000 millionaires. I don't do the work for them. They have to do the work. My job is to create a system, and their job is to the best system in the industry, and I'm obsessive about that system. And to be best, it has to be improving. So I'm obsessive about improving, and and I do that every day. I'm always looking to improve, and I'm always enjoying what I do. At Dunkin' Donuts now, uh, uh, they ask me how I'm doing, and I've changed that over the years, but I've always been somewhere between awesome or super or amazing. But lately, I'm incredible, and now at Dunkin' Donuts recently, they're starting to call me Mr. Incredible. So that's and you know what? It changes their day. When I said to the woman this morning, she said, "How you doing?" I said, "Incredible." She said, "I knew that." She said, "I love that." I mean, it even makes her happy to hear someone say that. Virtually 99% of the people you ask them how they're doing, they're okay or good or how are you doing? They don't even answer. Okay, how you doing? But just to be alive and healthy and in the United States, you're in the top 1 or 2% of people on the planet. You have to be doing well. But again, it's thank God it's Monday. Those people that, if you really believe thanks God it's Friday, you're spending your life in the wrong way. Life's too short. It's just like it's a blip in life is a blip in eternity. Don't waste it at something that you don't enjoy. I'm a bad loser. I'm a very, very bad loser. And this may be obnoxious to some people. And when I say this, I think I turn people off this next sentence, but show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. They've had a lot of practice. So now I'm just a bad loser. And I learned something about myself. I'm an incredible competitor. I'm just obsessive competitor. And when I lose, I don't take it well. But my favorite phrase is only losers need excuses. So I try never to give an excuse. I try never, ever to say why I lost. That's goes against my nature. But I learned something again in the last few years that while I'm trying to win, it may be more. It's probably more because it's avoiding the pain of losing. It's avoiding the pain of losing. It's not so much the glory or the acclamation or the reward of the trophy, the praise. It's not the great feeling of winning that I'm striving for. It's I well, that's important, but it's 10 times more important to avoid that sickening feeling of losing. And so I have to win like 9 out of 10 to be equal because it takes 9 wins or 10 wins to offset that pain of losing. So one of my characteristics is I'm just not a good loser. And so I fight, fight, fight. I fight until the end. They I'm just going to do my best and try to win. And one of the things I learned in that process is I don't waste times at things I'm not good at. I gave up golf when we took Jackson Hewitt public 30 years ago. I gave up golf because I'm not that good at it. And um, I I stuck with tennis, which I'm excellent at. And I just don't spend time at things that I'm not good at because I just the pain of losing is so enormous compared to the joy of winning. So I'm a bad loser, poor sport. I I go out every time trying to win. But on the other hand, if you won every time, life wouldn't be fun. I said one of my favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone was there was a guy, and of course, for those of you old enough to remember the old Twilight Zone, it was black and white and very low cost production. I bet you they didn't spend $10,000 an episode producing them. But one of the episodes was a guy was a womanizer and a gambler. He was an addicted gambler. And they showed him at the end, he was standing at a crap table and winning every time. And he had a beautiful woman on each arm. And he was throwing the dice and winning, winning, winning. And he thought he had been to heaven. And he realized that, no, this is hell. You have to lose. And my theory with winning and losing is without the losses, without the adversity, life would be so flat. Let's pretend you had this easy life where you had no adversity, you just went along, and then every once in a while you'd have a positive, and then you go along and then have a good thing. Well, when you have the valleys, then the joy of winning is even greater. If you have to face adversity and take a hit and then come back stronger, then it's even better. Life is or success is on adversity overcome, not heights achieved. It's on obstacles overcome rather than the the heights that you achieve. And we're all going to face adversity. We all are going to get knocked down, and you have to face it and understand it. And no, I can't win everything, and I don't want to win everything. God, I feel God humbles me by making sure that I don't win everything. Another thing that's different for me than others is I want that's really made one of the top 4 or 5 secrets to why I've been so blessed and successful is I try to do what's best for everyone, and what's best for them, not what's best for me. If it's best for me too, then fantastic. But if I had, and I've only lost over my 55-year career, I've only lost a handful of great employees that I really wanted to keep forever. I only lost a handful of them. And when I did, I never tried to change their mind. If they said, I want to go and become something, I want to go and climb mountains and tour the world, or become a doctor, or become some kind of professional baseball player. God bless you. Life's too short. Find out what you like to do. And so I've always, when giving advice to people and making them offers to join us or stay with us, I've always taken into consideration first what's best for them. And again, that's served me well. That once people understand that, then that's why we call our company loyalty. There's only one way to get loyalty, and that's to give loyalty. So I'm loyal to my people. And one thing that I should say, to be careful, because one of our principles at Liberty was give loyalty, get loyalty. And people would use that. Abrasive negative people would use that when they left. If they got let go, they would say, "Oh yeah, that's right." But they talk about this loyalty, and they're not really loyal to me. Well, that's not what ever happened. Each and every time someone left, it was because they had goals. Well, either one of two things. They either had goals that they didn't meet, or they didn't follow our principles. They disrespected others, or they lied, or they cheated, so you can only get let go from our company for not meeting your goals or for violating our principles. And they did one of those. So they've already given up. They didn't show us loyalty, so we don't owe them any loyalty. If you're not following the principles and you're not achieving your goals, and one of my biggest 3 weaknesses is I'm too soft. I give too many people too many chances. So you get more than one chance to miss your goal. And I keep people for too long. Now, that's a weakness of mine, and I know it is, and I prefer that versus not giving people enough time. There's certainly probably a pretty definitive line of how long you should keep someone if they're not meeting their goals. Let's say, yes, they are but they're not meeting their goals in their particular job. So you should give them some period of time. Let's say that's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever you set up as the fair amount of time. Well, I tend to give them an extra 6 months or a year longer than that. And so my loyalty is even greater than it should be. Again, I'd rather go 6 months too long than 2 months too short. So I make that conscious decision to put up with my own weakness, that I'm too forgiving of people that do not meet their goals. I give them more training, more guidance, more mentoring, more resources, whatever it takes to help them meet their goals. And speaking about principles, one of my favorite phrases is principles trump policies. And so many companies have set policies that are they're harmful to their success. When in 1993, we set out at Jackson Hewitt, we set out to be within Walmart within 3 years. That was my goal. And the first thing we did is here in Chesapeake, Virginia, was a Walmart location. And it was the only location in this area. And we asked the store manager, if we could take him to lunch. So he came and he had a sort of a Flanagan sweater, and we were all suited up. And I thought he wouldn't have been wearing that sweater except for coming to lunch with us. And of course, Walmart has this fanatical rule that you can't buy them. They cannot accept a lunch or dinner or flowers, candy, anything. You can't give them a gift. So he had to pay for his own lunch. But at lunch, he told a story that resonated with me in many, many ways. He said, and Sam Walton, this was 1993, I believe Sam Walton died within 2 years of that, if not 1 year. And so he knew Mr. Sam. And because those managers went to Walmart every quarter, at least every quarter, headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas, and for meetings. And he had known Sam Walton. And he said, there was a guy in a store. We have a money back guarantee that if your product breaks, bring it back and we'll exchange it. And that was when Walmart did have that. They don't have that anymore. But back in 1993, they had that. And he said that a guy came into the store with an old Ben Franklin stove. And he said it was so old, it was like he was like from the 20s. And it was all dilapidated and rusted out and beat up. And he walked to an employee in that part of the store. And the employee said, "Oh, just pick yourself. Go get another one and just leave that here and go get another one for yourself. And we'll exchange that." And even though Walmart had only existed since 55 or 60, somewhere in the 50s, and he couldn't possibly bought it at Walmart. And he said that was Mr. Sam. And so I took so much out of that little story. I mean, he called him Mr. Sam. What an immense respect he was showing for him. He told the story of how Mr. Sam went way above expectations and gave a customer a refund, in the sense he gave him a whole new Ben Franklin stove, and he didn't deserve it. And so now how's he going to be with the customers that walk into his store? I mean, how's he going to be? He's going to be a fanatical exceeder of customers' expectations. And I doubt that any customer would expect that, or most would not expect getting a whole new stove. But think of how he's going to be with all of the rest of the employees. And to me, there's so many lessons in that: the respect he had for Mr. Sam, the fact of the high quality of service that's disappeared in this country for the last as long as I can remember. the quality of service has gone down in the United States. And even if you look at Walmart in 2000, about 2000, they said we're these are our items we're not going to give money back guarantee in. And they said these are items that we're going to have a 1 month guarantee, and these are items that we're going to have a 1 year guarantee. And they divided up and they began reducing their guarantee, and so they've lost quality over the years, including now you can't. I mean, it's almost impossible to find someone to check out a person to check out. You have to. I don't go to Walmart, but I hear that you have to go to a machine and check out your own groceries. So, or your own, whatever you're buying at the Walmart, your own goods. So that's, I'll leave it there. I have more to talk about, but those are some of the things that are different about me. And again, some of them might be good, some of them might be bad, but they've served me well in changing tens of thousands of people's lives and enjoying every day, and having every day is incredible. Have a great day, everyone, and I'll talk to you next week.